Hippity hoppity hopping over hill and dale. Da 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 da.
Has man really been to the moon? It's been 50 years and the debate rages on. For the first time, a film compiles in a single piece of work all the best evidence in favor of the moon landings and the evidence contrary to them.
I russi sono stati zitti perché nessuno se lo sa spiegare.
What's this? A reflector. In fact, it's called a retroreflector, made up of many tiny prisms just like this.
Quindi tutta questa gente in 40 anni non ha mai confessato nulla.
Yeah! Look at that. We made a footprint inside of a vacuum.
Il peso che deve essere sostenuto dal motore è 1/6, quindi la spinta che viene scaricata sul terreno è molto modesta.
Roger, Jim, copy. And are you progressing towards Dune Crater now?
Yes.
For the first time, we can also analyze the Apollo pictures in detail with the aid of some among the top photographers in the world.
È chiaro che ci sono dei riflessi qui del metallo, che vuol dire che c'è una sorgente di luce dalla parte di chi fotografa.
La luce viene da dietro al modulo, no? L'astronauta o presunto tale è al buio totale e è illuminato. Perché?
La scurezza della parte scura di qua, della parte in ombra qua, è superiore alla parte in ombra qua.
Quindi queste ombre che vanno di qua e questa che va di qua non ha senso, vuol dire che il sole è qua, cioè a qualche metro di distanza.
Questo è proprio da incompetenti, chi l'ha fatto.
I don't want to get into it's fake or the moon landing was fake, but these pictures are fake.
Now, nearly 40 years after the first moon landing, NASA has confessed that the original film depicting Neil Armstrong's giant leap has been lost.
What was the Apollo project really? The biggest achievement in the history of mankind or the biggest fakery of all times, watched on live television by more than 500 million people?
Le foto avrebbero dovuto essere state fatte sulla Luna portandosi un'attrezzatura da studio.
Hi, this is Jonathan Mark. I'm with Flyby News, flybynews.com, an independent online resource that came out of a campaign to expose a high-risk flyby of Earth by NASA in their 1999 Cassini Earth mission, or Earth flyby mission, which was really to get to Saturn. But before they went to Saturn, they went to Venus and did 2 flybys, accelerated it, and then with 72.3 pounds of highly radioactive plutonium on board, came for an Earth flyby. You just seen the trailer of Massimo Mazzucco's film, American Moon. He's here now for an interview, and he has so many films that, Massimo, can you just tell me your whole professional itinerary with your filmmaking through the years? Because it's even more than the documentaries that I'm aware of.
Sure, very shortly. I'm 64 now. I started young as a fashion photographer. I worked as a fashion photographer for some 20 plus years. Then I moved on to making films, fiction films. Then in 2001, I was living in Los Angeles. 9/11 happened, and I felt the need to switch to make documentaries about this kind of issues, which were ever more interesting for me. I started making one documentary on 9/11, which was actually broadcast by Italian television. It was only in Italian. Then I made a second one called The New American Century, which is also available in English. And finally, between 2010 and 2013, I worked for 3 years to complete what I certainly consider my masterpiece. It's a 5-hour documentary on 9/11 called September 11, The New Pearl Harbor. It
That is
includes
certainly the epic of all the 9/11 movies. It actually gives you the whole scene all at once with the debunkers and the reality next to each other, and you do it so well that you can't deny the truth if you are willing to look at it.
Many people don't want to look at it because exactly for the reason you said. They said, if I look at it, I'll know I'll have to change my mind, and I don't want to. But anyway,
that's our issue. How did you get involved with the moon issue? I mean, when did you start questioning the official version?
Well, remember, as I told you, I was a professional photographer. So as a youth, as a kid, of course, I never questioned the moon landings. Not only that, I was actually born on July 20. So on the day of the moon landing, I was turning 15 that day. Wow. And even on that very evening, while everybody else was watching the moon landings live on television back in Italy, I was kissing the first girl, first time in my life. So to me, that was one unique event to remember. Except, as I said later on, I became a professional photographer. One day I looked at the pictures with a professional's eye, and I realized that exactly all the same problems that I was having in trying to replicate the sunlight in a studio, which as a fashion photographer you try to do a lot in order to save money and time, and you don't have to travel every time to Bahamas to shoot 3 bathing suits. You can do it in the studio. You have to fake the sunlight, but you can tell, as a professional, you can tell the light is fake. It's not the real sun.
So when I saw year was this about, would you say? What year was this?
When I looked at them as a photographer, I was in the beginning of the year 2000, when internet was starting to be available, and NASA had actually placed online all the moon pictures in high definition.
Right.
So that's when I could actually look at them in detail, because if you only look at the pictures that were published back in the 70s and 80s, they were only on magazines like a Cover of Life magazine, you don't really get to the detail that allows you to study the light exactly, because the quality on a print on a newspaper is mediocre. When you get the high quality, high definition pictures published from NASA, and you know they're the originals, that's when you realize that something is really wrong. So the first thing I did was to call my former, the photographer I had learned the craft from. He's a very famous worldwide still today. His name is Oliviero Toscani. And I called him up because I was, I said, is it me? I'm a conspiracy theorist, or is it really a problem? So I called him up and I asked him, Oliviero, what did you think when you saw the moon pictures for the first time? And his actual, and I quote him, literal answer was, I thought that had they asked me to do them, I would have done a much better job. This was his reply. Then I knew I was onto something. Wow. I said, well, then it's not me. It's not me who wants to see a conspiracy everywhere. So I started digging deeper, and of course, once you start, you never end. And things come out one after the other. And so this is how I put the film together. But the base
of my... Was that the element that made you skeptical enough to take a critical look at 9/11?
Yes, it's the photography first. As a photographer, as a professional, I knew right out, and I can prove it anytime to anybody, that those are not pictures taken with the sunlight. They are taken in the studio. The light is not correct to be the sunlight, especially if you're on the moon. You only have one source of light and no reflectors available, no secondary sources available. You cannot get that kind of lighting that you have in the moon pictures. That's obvious to me. I mean, I know I have struggled enough in backlight photography for 10 or 15 years in my profession to know exactly what you can get and what you cannot get. And in fact, in my career, I was using the same exact cameras, because I started in the 80s. So I was using the same exact camera, same exact film that the astronauts used on the moon pictures. So I knew
that environment and also radiation.
Excuse me?
They got the clear pictures with all that radiation and the environment.
That was one of the problems. When I went on trips with all the film that I shot, I had to carry a special lead-protected suitcase to put them through the X-ray scan at the airport, and that's a 5-second scan. These rolls of films have been unprotected for more than up to 8 hours on the surface of the moon, where not only do you have the small X-ray amount that you get here through the scanner, you have cosmic rays, you have gamma rays, you have all kinds of cosmic rays, which are impossible to stop. And for me to see those film that are absolutely free of any kind of damage from radiation tells me right away that film has never been outside the atmosphere. It's impossible. Yeah. I know the damage that film suffers, that kind of film especially, that it suffers when it's exposed to a quick radiation, let alone 8 hours under cosmic rays. It's impossible.
Well, I was totally taken by your film, Massimo. I saw it just yesterday, and the DVD came from Amazon. I'm in the U.S. If anybody wants the film from beyond the U.S., you can get it right from Massimo's site, and that's in the trailer as well, and flybynews.com has many links to you. But I feel like I was a student, and you were kind enough to be patient to even summarize what you were explaining, to allow the information for me to see what you saw as a professional photographer. I was able to see all these idiosyncrasies in such a good way that no wonder why your film had to be 3.5 hours long, because you not only are an investigative reporter, but you're also a teacher of the evidence, and that requires lessons and understanding. It's brilliant, and it might be the most timely film around now. How do we get beyond this cognitive dissonance and denial regarding this issue? Do you have any suggestions, or is your film going to be the spark? Is that possible?
Well, I tell you, the conviction in the majority of people that we did go to the moon and that we do trust science and all that comes with it is very, very strong. So I don't have any high hopes that this will change the perception in the majority of people, okay? Yeah. But again, these are very, very strongly rooted convictions. And I've had people watch my film, friends, who watch it, who actually say, your evidence is undeniable, I cannot reply to that. It's impossible to contest it. But I still think we went to the moon. So,
yeah, it's easier to live that way, I guess, because what does it mean by being aware of that? I mean, then it makes everything, our whole lifetimes, under this veil of secrecy and corruption and distortion.
Well, it's a bit like 9/11. You can bring up as much evidence as you want that the official version is it's a big lie. Mm-hmm. But yet again, unless the person is ready to accept that our government would do something like that, or parts actually of our government would do something like that to us, there's no way you can convince them, because it means to have to reassess the entire, readjust the entire assessment of the world.
Yeah, how is that for you? I mean, how are you doing with that? Yeah.
Well, I got used to it. I mean, I've been 15 years doing this counter-information. But again, I have to be honest, in 2001, I was living in the States then, and the first time I saw a website, I think it was a French website, that doubted that the official narrative of 9/11 was fake, was false, and that the Twin Towers had been demolished by intentionally, my first honest reaction was, oh, come on. Americans would never do this to themselves. Yeah. This was me thinking, okay? I remember those words echoing in my mind even now.
Yes.
The problem is that then you are at a fork road. You have to decide whether you either want to stay with your comfort zone and just reject the evidence that comes at you, or you look at it. And once you start looking at it, if you're ready to change your mind, you're in for a big surprise.
Building 7 was really the smoking gun, I would say, of when you saw that 5:20 that afternoon. Then you have all the evidence with what's in the dust and everything, all the and the policy since. That's very explosive, because we're still involved. I mean, the United States government that I feel a part of because I'm a citizen. Is still involved with the longest war in its history, and they use 9/11 as justification. So it shows you how important truth is for policies that will either destroy us or help liberate us.
And it also shows you how difficult it is to destroy a lie when the lie has been created to support such large military operations. Because Because if you have such a large military operation, it means you also have the power of the media with you. Because the media comes behind the powerful, doesn't go to support the loners or the lone thinkers or the critical thinkers. It's with the money. And so it shows you how difficult it is to break through the veil of the mainstream media. Fortunately, we have the internet now. Yep. And ironically enough, it was invented by the military some 20, 30 years ago by now. They invented it for a totally different reason, but it became actually an instrument that is kind of jeopardizing their whole control of the world. But fortunately, by using the internet, we can at least access the people who are willing to look for a different alternative story. So I leave it back to everyone's independent right of choice. I don't wish to impose on anyone any uncomfortable truth that doesn't sit well with them. Right. I say, look, I got this information. It's like the same. I made a movie about cancer, the Forbidden Cures, which shows basically how at least 10 important natural cures for cancer have been ignored or suppressed in the last 100 years. But when somebody with cancer calls me and says, what should I do? I never tell them do this or do that or do that. I say, look, this is the information I got. I'm not a doctor. The information is for you to evaluate. You make your own decision. And I do the same with every of my film. I don't force the conclusion onto the audience that no, we did not go to the moon. I never say this in my film. You just saw it, so you can testify to that. Yeah. I don't state we never went to the moon. I just say, if we did go to the moon, why is then A? Why is then B? How is it possible then C? And how could it happen then D? And then if you have the answers to that, fine. And if you don't, it's your problem. You have to decide whether we went to the moon or not. I think that my job should stop at presenting the evidence and not necessarily forcing a conviction onto the audience. Because as I said, these issues are very, very deeply rooted in our own personal beliefs. So you cannot just go in with a tool and remove them and change them. It's not like pulling a tooth.
That's why it's so long, and you're able to help people overcome our resistance to learning facts that we've always seen through the wrong lens, in a way.
Well, I divide the audience in three main categories. One category is like people like you and me and many others who already have understood certain dynamics and therefore have no problem at all accepting, let's call them alternative truth. The other category, which is the majority still in the world, is at the opposite. Not only do they believe the official versions everywhere, every time, but they like to do that because it's more comfortable. In between, there's a gray area of people who doubt, people who actually would like to know if they were given the right information. So I provide that information for those people, and then I leave it up to them to decide what they want.
That's really wonderful, and so that's why I'm making copies and I'm passing them out, and I'm directing people to your websites as much as I can. And do you think we'll be able to show it publicly at some point in the future? And tell me about the festivals that it's been submitted to, and your plans for going online.
Yes, I'm submitting it right now. See, the big year is next year because next year is the 50th anniversary.
Right.
So I prepared right in time for that, but I'm submitting the film to some festivals around the world. Should any of those accept the film, they want to know that this has not been public on the internet. So yes, you can make as many copies as you want, and anybody who orders the DVD can make as many copies as they want. Just please don't put it online because it would spoil my chances to go to any festival in the near future.
And don't sell it. Give it away.
Well, of course. I mean, if you're going to make some money, call me up, and that's a different story. No, I'm saying, of course, make copies for free. That's understood. Yes.
Eventually, it'll probably be online after it gets accepted or after it's shown somewhere.
Well, at some point before July 20 next year, which is the 50th anniversary, will certainly have to be online. But how close to that date, I don't know yet.
Oh, this is very exciting. It's an important element because I've been trying to get people involved. My history is that I got involved with the military-industrial complex by meeting Carl Grossman, an investigative reporter, filmmaker, that was alerting me to the plans for the U.S. put weapons in space and nuclear weapons in space and the whole deal. They had a Vision 2020 report back in the 1990s, and it kind of spelled out the world domination plan. So to try to stop weapons from entering space, but 9/11 was the excuse for putting weapons in space. So, and then by doing 9/11, people shared Bart Sibrel's film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which I have a question about that. I didn't see this in your film, and I was wondering what you thought of the footage in that film regarding the three astronauts faking they were halfway to the moon, but looked like they were in low Earth orbit.
I think that that's one of the best pieces of evidence ever uncovered by anybody on the moon hoax, definitely. Yeah. It was very smart of him to even notice the trick. I had seen those images at some point, but I did not realize the trick that they played, and thanks to Sibrel's clarification, I was able to see that. The reason why I didn't put it in my film, because I think that, I mentioned a few things, of course, that other people have discovered before me in my film, but that one in particular, I think, is Sibrel's unique pearl. So I would have been a little too much to put it in my film and get some kind of credit for that. That's really to his credit completely. And again, we all, in this community of filmmakers, we all share the discoveries. I will myself share whatever I found with the photographers. I made interviews, as you have seen the film. You have seen some very, very famous international photographers take a look at the moon pictures for the first time, I think, in history, and telling you why they think that they're not taking on the moon with the sun. So that will be something that becomes everybody's property at some point, and I don't mind that sharing. But in particular, that discovery by Sibrel is his signature thing, so I didn't feel right to just put it in my film as well. People know it enough anyway.
I'm glad to get that confirmation. And on your film, you were showing how it was staged in a set by following the fall line that was in a 360-degree direction. That's remarkable that you can see that in such a long expanse. Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because
Sure, absolutely.
Don't know what I'm saying.
Well, when you try to fake a large landscape in a studio, it be the desert, the moon, or whatever, what you do is you build a few yards of real ground on which you're going to pose your stand your models, and then the rest is either a painted background or a back projection, or in modern days you have the green screen, in which you superimpose a digital image of a faraway, distant landscape. This technique was first used scientifically, very technically accurately in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey. You see this incredible shows landscapes with the savannah in the background, and then you see the picture of the studio where it was shot, and it's really shocking and remarkable how you can get that effect by showing a small part in foreground. The trick is that there is a continuous line for the photographer to tell whether this is a studio picture or not, is that you usually have a continuous line crossing from left to right halfway through the frame, and that line is the line that separates your foreground, which is real, from the background, which is an image. Strangely enough, if you take the 360 panoramas of some of the lunar missions, you can see that the straight line, not only does it cross every single picture taken by the astronauts from left to right, so you know that you're in a studio, but the actual 360, it's entirely one full continuous line from left to right, which means that either the astronauts have landed on some kind of truncated cone, separated from a distance from the hills in the distance, or they're in a studio and the pictures have just been joined through that line. That line is a big teller that you're actually in a studio. A line separating the foreground from the background, crossing your picture from left to right all the way, tells you that 95% of the times you're in a studio.
That amazed me, and the other thing I would say that gives total proof, besides the sound motions from the talking from the Earth to the moon and back, you have it timed out where what the speed of sound can be transmitted. And then they were much faster than them being on the moon in their responses. So that was to me, it was proof.
Well, if you want me to talk about the sound delay, I can tell you very quickly.
Please.
The sound delay, it's a very simple calculation to make. If you know the speed of light, you know that for a question to reach the moon and for the answer to come back, and that's providing the astronaut replies immediately, it's 2.6 seconds. So if I go, hello, how are you, Scott, and you're on the moon, by the time I hear, oh, I'm fine, thank you, at least 2.6 seconds have to go by. That's the minimum, if you react immediately to my question. I found instances in the original tapes, and this is very important, in the original tapes, which are called by the very debunkers, those who support NASA, as the only reference tapes that should be used for research. I found at least 3 instances in which the reply comes back too fast. So in my opinion, if you were to fake those communications here on Earth, you would have to artificially introduce a 2.6 delay by an electronic signal, an electronic circuit. And apparently, obviously, in those 3 instances, somebody forgot to throw the switch. So the guy was next door. He was replying immediately. Yep. Somebody didn't throw the switch, and the delay is not there. It's there all the time, except in at least 3 instances. And again, one instance is enough to prove that that conversation did not take place between the Earth and the Moon. I mean, there cannot be one time in human history where light travels faster than the other times. So even one would be enough. I found 3 of them that tell you that the distance is not correct.
In contrast to that, there was no sound under the LEM when it launched off the moon. It was like a puppet show. It just
absolutely. I mean,
and they had
all the anomalies of the LEM. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please talk about that.
I'm saying all the anomalies of the LEM put together. I mean, the fact that you have no crater under the sand, you have no dust in the footpads, you have no flame under the engine when it takes off, and the same engine when it's tested on Earth does have a very long and visible flame. The fact that you have no noise from the engine whatsoever inside the cabin, even though the engine is sitting inside the cabin. I mean, the astronauts are literally sitting on the engine itself, but there's no noise, absolutely. I mean, all those things put together, and the images of the way that this LEM takes off from the moon, it really looks like a little toy, like a little miniature thing made in the studio, and pretty poorly, I must say. My eye can tell right away. I don't expect everybody to see that right away, but I was able to tell that was done in the studio, and a very bad job as well, I would say.
Well, it's so embarrassing. It's like being a little child and hearing about Santa Claus not being real. But
again, a lot of people like Santa Claus and they want to keep believing in him. So you cannot force them to the opposite. Everybody has to reach that conclusion in due time.
Yeah, and I'm like an idealist, so I always hope for the best and try to prepare for the worst. But I wrote this article called "Litmus Tests for Truth and Transformation," and it kind of explains why 9/11 truth is not enough alone, but the moon issue is the element that's in our future, because like 9/11 is in our past in some ways, even though it's reverberating still. The moon issue, they're going to have to keep delaying these trips that they plan on doing, and so it's in our future and it's in our present, and it's inevitable that that's going to be revealed.
And in time, what you learn is that the money is flowing out very quickly for the new projects. Now we have this new project Orion. Originally, it was supposed to go back to the moon, I think, by 2012 or something like that. Then it was postponed. Then it's 2016. Now it's 2018. Now I think it's next year. And Trump said something. You know what? While you're going, why don't you put astronauts in it? Oh no. We have to test everything first. Wait a minute. 50 years ago, with the technology we had 50 years ago, and mind you, in 50 years of technology is like 3 glacial eras, more or less, in terms of history, okay?
Yes.
With the technology, they would go and come back easily, and there was no problem whatsoever, except for Apollo 13, which was a story on its own. But basically, it was easy to go, and there was no problem putting 3 men out there. Now, suddenly, oh, no, we have to test all the equipment before we put people through this region of space. Obviously, something doesn't match between the easiness with which they allegedly went 50 years ago and the problems that they're funding now before they, in their words, return to the moon. In my words, go for the first time, if they ever will.
Well, thank you for bringing reality and truth to us closer.
Amen. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.